quickly go through the ecosystem on the HyperEVM and also the interesting protocol. So first one is Felix. So Felix is right now I think the second largest protocol on HyperEVM, only behind Hyperliquid. And the Felix is significant in the sense that it is actually the first CDP stablecoin protocol on Hyperliquid. So right now, user can actually stake Hype or UBTC and then to mint the Felix stablecoin feUSD. And the use case for feUSD right now at the moment is very limited. The only use case for feUSD to stake it, to either stake it into the liquid stability pool so that it can be used to facilitate the liquidation of those insolvent or close to being insolvent close to CDP position, and therefore to earn a little bit of protocol revenue from the corresponding collateral. So this is the first use case. And the other use case is to lend onto the other lending protocol, for example, HyperLend, and then user can borrow it to go leverage loan on the side of the long tail spot assets. So this is the only two use case of feUSD at the moment. However, how come the TVO of feUSD been growing super fast? And a lot of people have been putting their money into the feUSD to farm the airdrop. So that there are two reasons behind it. The first reason is that the Felix is currently working with Morpho. So they are going to roll out their own HyperEVM version of Morpho, and they are going to achieve a few of the use cases that is very critical for HyperEVM with the Morpho's infrastructure. So first one is that they're going to be integrated with HUSD, which we'll also cover later in the video. They're going to be integrated with the level USD to allow people to borrow feUSD and go leverage loan on HUSD. HUSD is going to be a yield-bearing stablecoin, or people can borrow HUSD to go leverage loan on other HyperEVM native asset, for example, a Hype or HypurRFi, HypurRFi, or other currency like the Hyper, like the governance token from the HypurrFi lending protocol. And also they're going to, the other reason why the Felix is significant is that the team is also behind the development of the HUSD. So far, there's no major native stablecoin available on HyperEVM. So the users and also Hyperliquid itself are actually forced to use the bridge USDC as a collateral or as a trading asset. However, there's a few difficulties coming from that setup. The first one is that, and also the most important one is that there is no way for the HyperEVM ecosystem to adjust the supply of the stablecoin by themselves within the ecosystem. And the second reason is that they're not able to share the yield coming from the native stablecoin, and therefore encourage more people to hold the stablecoin and then provide liquidity to the ecosystem. So these two reasons encourage the Felix team to develop the HUSD. So HUSD is going to be a RWA-backed stablecoin and building on top of the infrastructure of the M0 protocol. And the collateral will be fully made of the short-term US treasuries, and the user of the HUSD will be able to earn so it's going to be a rebased yield-bearing stablecoin. We're going to earn the US treasury yields. So that is the setup of how the HUSD going to be look like. And the user might ask, like, how's the difference between feUSD from Felix and also HUSD? The biggest reason is that HUSD is going to be a store of value. It's going to be the fundamental foundation of the HyperEVM ecosystem. So going forward, for all the trading, for all the perps, it's going to be denominated in the HUSD because the value is pretty safe, and unlike collateral, it's also pretty solid. And feUSD is more for trading, funding currency. For example, the popular trade will be borrowing feUSD and to go leverage loan on HUSD instead of the other way around. And the HUSD supply is controlled by the issuer, which is Felix and the M0 protocol. However, the feUSD supply, because it's CDP currency, so it's going to be controlled completely by the ecosystem. So wherever the market is going up, the feUSD supply will increasing, and the HUSD supply will also increase, but probably not so fast. But when the market is decreasing, feUSD supply will decrease also pretty fast. However, and the HUSD supply will probably also decrease, but also probably not so fast. HUSD will serve as the foundation, and the feUSD will serve as the liquid, and then the liquid currency that's more volatile, more sensitive to the market volatility. And that's going to be the relationship between feUSD and HUSD. And going forward, there's going to be also people talking about the C and ORT native to the Hyperliquid ecosystem. And so It means that for HUSD and also feUSD, there's going to be more use cases. In addition to the stability pool, lending and borrowing LP on Hyperliquid, and the leverage staking, like how HUSD is used on the EVM ecosystem, will be probably one of the biggest use case for HUSD and feUSD going forward. And Felix is also talking about they're going to build liquid version of the liquidity pool token, just like how FX Protocol has built the FX Safe. So that would be another use case for feUSD, because it means that people can actually borrow feUSD and then go leverage on the stability pool, and then provide liquidity for the liquidation of the Felix protocol. So this is a Felix protocol, the second biggest protocol on the HyperEVM ecosystem right now. And the next interesting protocol is HyperLend. So HyperLend is interesting in the sense that it is actually the only place you can build leverage long position on the HyperUSD. So you can see right now, you can actually borrow, you can actually buy Hype and it's supply here. Sorry, buy Hype and then go to the Hyperliquid and then stake it as a RESA high and then supply it here. So for RESA high, you're going to earn like around 2% of the native staking yield. And then you can actually use RESA high as collateral to borrow high. So the borrowing APY is like 0.73%. So it means that you can actually build leverage loop on top of RESA high and therefore able to earn the spread between the borrowing cost and also the staking yield. So this is why HyperLend is interested, and it's also growing pretty fast. And the other protocol is called the HypurrFi. So HyperRFi is also interesting in the sense that it is allows you to build a leverage loop with only one click. Before that, we're looking at HyperLend, where there is a lending market. We're also looking at the Felix, which is CDB currency, and HyperRFi is somewhat combine the two. So it means that you can actually select where you like to deposit, where you like to borrow, and then turn on the E mode and then adjust the LTV, and therefore build a leverage position by one click. And the reason why it's interesting is that so far the selection is not a lot. However, once the Felix roll out the HUSD, and then once the Felix also start to roll out the liquid version of the stability pool token, it means people can actually come to HyperRFi and then build leverage staking position with USD. And then so far, people can already build the leverage staking position of the HyperRFi. And then their HyperRFi is actually not running the lending market itself. It's actually building on top of the HyperLend. So it means that they are actually streaming liquidity for HyperLend to help people to build a leverage position. So it's actually aggregator, and also just similar to the DeFi saver on EVM. And the next interest protocol is called the Loop Hype. So the Loop Hype is interesting in the sense that it is actually help you to diversify your Hype exposure. So once you deposit Hype, it help you to allocate your Hype across different protocols. So including the HyperLend we're just looking at, and also HyperRFi, and also the help you to stake your Hype. So once you deposit your Hype into the pool, and then you'll be able to optimize your yield. So Hyperloop Hype is actually a yield optimizer, and then the votes help you to maximize your yield, and therefore to get a relatively stable level of the APY. And lastly is the Cinnamon. So Cinnamon is also another protocol in lending. However, compared to HyperLend or compared to HyperRFi, it's not so interesting. It is also growing pretty fast, but the biggest difference between the Cinnamon and also HyperRFi and HyperLend is because that the LTV on Cinnamon is relatively higher. People who would like to build the RESA high leverage staking position with higher leverage would rather come to Cinnamon. However, it also comes with more risk. And the Cinnamon is a relatively new protocol, so there's not a lot of record of the historical liquidation. It's also more inherently riskier. So that's about the Cinnamon. So far, we have Felix, HyperLend, HyperRFi, Loops, Hype, and also the Cinnamon. These are the fastest growing protocols on HyperEVM. And once the HUSD is rolled out, and then the goes live on and integrating with other protocols, the TVO for this protocol I believe will further grow, especially once the Felix roll out the HyperEVM version of Morpho. So there's going to be a lot of the stablecoin leverage staking opportunities.